The year is over, and I don't know what to do with that information. I just know that it's a fact. 2022 came and went, friends, and I don't know what to say to that. I can't believe we're in a new year. Happy New Year. I'm here to talk about all of those books I read and absolutely loved in 2022. Today we're going to be discussing the best books of 2022, if I do say so myself. At least based on my reading, I feel like 2022 was a year of up and down reading. You guys know this, I've talked about this before, but that being said, I feel like the books I did find were of the highest quality. According to me, that's completely subjective. Like, don't take this as like, they're the best. I'm not a New York Times article, okay? Like, I mean, maybe I am, because sometimes they're inaccurate, but you know, it's like for my taste, these books were the best. And also, let a girl know down in the comments what you read last year that you absolutely loved. Like, please share the best books of 2022 that you guys have. Leave them all in the comments, because I'm dying to know what you read and loved last year. But before we talk about my absolute favorite books of 2022, I have to talk about another favorite, and that is Flip, which is the sponsor of today's video. I've talked about Flip before on my channel, but the reason why I love them so much is because they're quite literally shaking up the beauty shopping experience. Personally, it's my favorite new beauty app because you get a premium shopping experience like you really don't see anywhere else. Free same-day shipping, easy returns, amazing customer service, and an elite rewards program that rewards you for doing things you already do, like scrolling, liking, in a way that accumulates you points so that you can save up to 30% off on basically every order you make. The best way I can explain it is that you get the amazing community feel of YouTube with the products you find at Sephora, with TikTok style reviews made by real customers like you and me, not to mention that they also have over 500 brands on the app so that you can find your new holy grail products. I recently placed another order on Flip, and let me tell you about the 3 products that stood out to me because I got them right here with me. First of all, these Pixie eye patches. I've been using them day and night to kind of zhuzh up that skincare routine. A brow pencil from e.l.f. that is quite literally a dupe to the Brow Wiz by Anastasia, and the lipstick I'm currently wearing. It's this one by Pat McGrath. It's the Matte Trance lipstick in the shade Peep Show. It's very good. I have reviews on all 3 of these products up on the app already, and it makes it super easy because you can link the product and you can film in-app or you can upload from your camera roll, and it makes it such a seamless experience. So if you want to up your beauty shopping game with Flip, you can download the Flip app for free today or go to flip.shop/MelReads and save 30% on your first order with code MelReads. And we're starting off strong with one of my first few reads from last year, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, which I feel I don't talk about nearly enough for how much I loved this. I love retellings. I grew up fascinated with Greek mythology, and so I'd been putting this off for a really long time. It's one of those books that I found immensely intimidating, and then when I got into it, it was just so easy to eat up that I did it in just a few hours. And I think the retelling aspect was done so well in a way that Madeline Miller, yes, did her own thing and twisted certain parts of what we typically see about the Trojan War and the Iliad and made it her own, while still paying homage and being very respectful to the original myths of Achilles and Patroclus. And so in that regard, I absolutely loved this. If you don't know what this is about, we basically follow Achilles, who is the son of a sea goddess, and the infamous King Peleus, as well as Patroclus, who is a young exiled prince, as the two come together and form this a very unlikely bond. They both train on their Chiron and they learn all the things about war, medicine, and really everyday life that they need. But then the Trojan War happens, Helen of Sparta happens, and so they both have to go to war, which in the way it was explored in this book was absolutely phenomenal because we really get to see all of the traits and nuances to both of these characters. And for such a short book, I think the character construction was one of my personal favorite things because we get to see all of those layers of toxicity, of toxic masculinity, of discovering one's identity, one's likes and dislikes. And I think the way that it explores queerness as well for 2 young boys who are unaware of what they like and slowly discover that with each other, I think was very tactfully done. It does have lyrical purple prose, which obviously added to my love of this book, and it made me feel all the feels. Obviously, the ending is kind of a given if you know about the myth, but otherwise, like, it was all kinds of good, and I would highly, highly recommend. I mean, listen, all the tabs. And next, in contrast to a book that made me really, really emotional and was very heartbreaking, we have a book that I found immensely funny and super entertaining, and that is Finley Donovan is Killing It by Al Cosimano. I absolutely adored this book. It was my very first cozy mystery, and I didn't think I would love this as much as I did, yet again, a recipe for success. We have our main character, Finley Donovan, who is a writer, a struggling writer at that. She is also a divorced single mom, and so a lot of her motivation to write and be successful as a writer is to be able to provide for her kids. However, she is really struggling with writer's block, And as she goes to a meeting with her agent to sort of walk her over what her newest novel is going to be about, somebody overhears and thinks that she is an assassin for hire, and then she is hired to be an assassin, which is something she knows nothing about, but Miss Finley goes through with it, and it is all kinds of crazy. It really reminded me of like those Melissa, I always forget her last name, McCarthy, whatever her last name is, really reminds me of like her bounty hunter mystery movies, which are like all kinds of unlikely, but it is that makes it so good. The comedic timing of this book is absolutely phenomenal. The trouble that Finley gets up to with her partner in crime in the book, Vero, is just out of this world. Like, I could not even picture myself in my wildest dreams in a situation like this, which just makes it all the more entertaining and hilarious. So if you're looking for like a nice, cozy read, just in the morning with a coffee to laugh your ass off, I would definitely recommend this one, because not only is it funny, but it's also very heartfelt in the way that Finley deals, obviously, with her divorce, with being a single mom, with dealing with parenting with a person that she is no longer with and is now with another person. It's just all very layered, which I quite love. Next up, we actually have a memoir, which I'm quite surprised at because I don't tend to read memoirs a lot. However, the ones that I have read have for the most part been quite good, and this is My Body by Emily Ratajkowski. I absolutely adored this book in a way that I think I wasn't expecting when I picked this up. It's super short, the audiobook is narrated by Emily Ratajkowski herself, and it explores her relationship with her body, specifically after her son was born. But the start of the book goes way back into her childhood and how she was raised by her mom. A lot of generational trauma is spoken about when it comes to bodily image in terms of eating, and that developing into feminist empowerment through, obviously, with Emily Ratajkowski in particular, showing her body and really owning all that she has, but the industry seeing it in a completely different way, the industry over-sexualizing people and exploiting women's bodies. And this book explores all of that, I think, in a very tactful, emotional, but real way. It's actually a book that I'm quite looking forward to rereading this year, particularly now that I am very much in the zone of really focusing on my health and really focusing on healing my relationship with my body and my relationship with food. I feel like this read right now would be quite impactful yet again. So I loved this the first time around. Can't wait to read about this again. This literally became one of my favorite books of all time. That is Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. I was just so charmed by this book, and it felt so refreshing for YA fantasy, which is something that I, at the time, was very disappointed with. At the time when I read this book, I did not want to hear about YA fantasy. I did not want to see it. I did not want to be close to it. I didn't want anything to do with it because everything felt so generic and so repeated and so overdone that when I read this book, it felt like a breath of fresh air. We follow Vanya, who is a jewel thief. She has never really known a mother's love. She is the goddaughter of Death and Fortune, which are deities in this world. And obviously these deities, these spirits, have a mind and a plan of their own. So they end up stealing the life of the princess that she squires for. And now Vanya finds herself impersonating Giselle, who is the princess, while also being a jewel thief, and then having a curse placed on her because of her vanity and her greed, which she has a handful of days to figure out how to solve and how to completely eradicate from her life, because if not, she will die, while also playing a game of cat and mouse with a detective that is hell-bent on finding her and catching her. And when I tell you that this book is amazing, it's because it really is. The character construction in here is absolutely phenomenal. We really have a main character that is immensely complex. None of her actions are unjustified, and just everything about this worked for me. This was so good in the most unlikely way, because I was not expecting to love this. I don't know if you know what time it is. I know. Daisy Jones and the Six. And I've talked about this before. The person I will become when this show comes out, you guys will not stand me. I am so ready for March to come around so I can watch this show, because this book really became my absolute favorite read of 2022. Just look at that. Definitely a book I want to reread because it's so easy to consume, and I feel like every single time I would read this book, I would find something different to love and absolutely obsess over. So I feel like this year maybe warrants a reread of Daisy Jones and the Six. But we essentially follow Daisy Jones, who is a groupie. Hello. She also has a lot of aspirations aspirations to be a singer and have a career in the music industry, and so she ends up partnering with the Six, who is a separate band who is really struggling to really find their momentum. And when they join forces, everything sort of falls into place and they really get to live the high of the rock industry in the 70s and the 80s and really relish in everything it has to offer. It obviously talks about the nuances of being in a rock band. It's inspired on Fleetwood Mac, so I feel like it has a lot of good inspiration to draw from, and it definitely does so very, very well. Because as the book goes on, we get to see everything from romance to relationships to the complications of relationships when you are on tour. I would argue that most of these characters are so unlikable that I can totally see why people wouldn't enjoy this book. Me personally, I was just deconstructing every person. I was psychoanalyzing as I went. I am no psychologist, but it was a great time. And it was the most entertaining thing. It is an oral history method, so everything is told in a series of interviews, which I think is genius because every time a character talks and is telling a story, they just battle each other out because you never know who's telling the truth, who's embellishing, who's lying, who's saying what and where and why. And so I think it perfectly encapsulates the reason why the band broke up in the first place, and it is just absolutely incredible. I love this book so much, and if you haven't read this, what are you waiting for? Another absolute favorite I read last year was Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee. Surprisingly, the very last installment in the Greenbone saga was my favorite. I read all 3 books last year. As you know, we hosted a little read-along for it, and this book absolutely destroyed me. So in the Greenbone saga, we start off with the Cowell family, who are legendary Greenbone warriors. They utilize Jade to enhance their abilities and look after their clan. Now, said family is in a switch over, meaning that the newest generation of Cowell members will step up into positions of leadership, and now they have to figure out what dynamics they want, how they want to carry on this legacy, and all of that will happen in the midst of a clan war, which is so very entertaining because not only do we get an incredibly detailed political system in this world, we get an amazing yet simple magic system, and then we also get the most complex, I would argue, characters that I've possibly ever read about. Not only that, but we also get full-on like martial arts fight sequences and a lot of generational trauma, let me tell you that. It is one of the most compelling things I have ever read. The audiobooks, by the way, if you've tried to read Jade City and maybe you're like a little bit stuck, you don't know what to do, the audiobooks for the series are incredible. It is a family saga, so it is going to be very focused on each of the members of the clan, what roles they play in everyday life, in family life, and exactly how that influences everything that happens in the series. I have never loathed but loved characters all at the same time, and I also love how fearless Fonda Lee is at the time of writing. She is not afraid to kill off her own characters regardless of who they are. She is not afraid to go all out in terms of politics, conflict, and I, going into it, was not expecting such an intricate story. The way everything is set up just feels so vastly real that if you told me Kekon was a real place, I would fucking believe you. Probably the best end of series I've ever read. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which also very quickly became one of my favorite books of all time. I absolutely love horror books that provide loads of commentary, specifically when it's not a contemporary time frame. I love all of the commentary on the time. I won't call it a period piece because it's the 90s, and I don't know if it would qualify as like a period piece. However, let me tell you, the social commentary of the time, from patriarchal structures, which I mean are arguably still there for a lot of people, but in the 90s it was like very, very strong. Racial commentary, surprisingly, in this book that I quite actually enjoyed, and the conversation surrounding women being undermined at every turn just because they're quote unquote like the weaker sex, or things that women have done for years and years on an everyday basis that go unappreciated by the people around them, are all talked about in this book. We follow our main character Patricia, who is a housewife, and she is a part of a book club with other housewives. They all feel very unappreciated in their everyday lives despite everything everything that they do and they provide for each of their households. And they feel like the only way they can express everything they really think about and all of their intellects is through this book club. However, Miss Patricia ends up discovering and meeting the resident vampire, and because of it, she will try and enlist the help of the rest of the book club to eradicate said vampire. It's not that easy, but it is a journey, if I do say so myself. The horror aspects of this book were actually very scary, or at least to me. Maybe I'm easily spooked when it comes to like horror, and maybe I'm just a basic bitch in that sense, but I was very scared in this book. Also, the audiobook narrator made it very scary in a way that I was jumping and gasping in a way that I'd never done before with a book, but it was very compelling. Again, the commentary is one of my favorite parts of this because it is explored very blatantly on page in a way that makes you go, oh my god, yes. And when doing a little bit of research about this book, it actually makes a lot of sense because a lot of it was inspiration from Grady Hendrix's mom and how growing up she was part of a book club and she was an avid reader and everybody put her down for it and nobody appreciated her enough for doing all the things she did, and he wanted to explore that in this setting in a way that felt substantial and almost apologetic and empowering at the same time, and I think he did that quite well. I quite loved this. My Year in Rest and Relaxation by Atessa Moshfegh. Hello? I absolutely loved this book, and I think based on like the last few reads of the year, I think I am quite into character studies. Books that do absolutely nothing yet explore the mind of a single character. And this is exactly what this book did. We have our main character who remains unnamed for the entirety of the book to really fall in the throes of this character's life but never know their name. 10 out of 10 if you ask me. However, in this book we follow our main character as she decides that she wants to take a year of rest and relaxation. She has many problems she is facing in her personal daily life, and yet she thinks that by relaxing and resting for a year, she will be able to magically wake up and her problems will be disappeared. Most of all, it is a commentary on what is outwardly seen that you cannot match to the inside or you cannot perceive on the inside. This is a character who is stated several times throughout the book to have quote-unquote everything that conventionally, societally, people would want or need. She's got an amazing education, she's got the apartment, she's got the boyfriend, she's got the friends, she's got the money, she's got everything you could ever dream of. However, the way she feels inside, again, doesn't match that quote-unquote success that she has. And the most fascinating part about this book is that we really see all of this through a medicated haze. So she is not all here, and it makes you face the harsh reality of, even though you would like to ignore things, and even though you would like to sort of, what's it called, skive around the issue, sway around the issue, you still have to face all of those things that have caused any level of trauma, any level of sadness, any level of despair, any level of anger, any level of anything really. And we see it because our main character thinks that she'll be able to magically wake up, and the reality is that going through this medicated haze only makes her deal with these things in a stronger and realer way than she would have ever thought possible. And I absolutely loved that. Definitely a book I would like to reread in the future to also annotate because I didn't do it the first time around. But what a fascinating read, honestly, because I'd never read anything like it, and I remain not having read anything like this. In My Dreams I Hold a Knife is also in this list, and I also would never have thought that this book would have been in this list. Honestly, this list is so very all over the place, and I am kind of here for it. However, this book really stole my breath, stole my heart, stole my mind. I love books that in any way, shape, or form resemble or feel similar to Black Swan in terms of mental lagoons and things not being all that they seem, and also adding to that a little murder mystery, and this book had all of those things and more. We follow our main character Jessica after everybody has graduated college, and she feels very accomplished in life. She feels like she has achieved everything she could possibly need or want, and she wants to go to this college reunion to flaunt all of that because she wasn't all that in college. And so she goes, she meets up with her group of college friends, and they will all be faced with the harsh reality of the unsolved murder they haven't talked about in ages that will be solved at all costs during this reunion. Jessica as the vessel for the story is probably one of my favorite things because she is such an unreliable narrator, not only because of the whole mental lagoon situation, but also because her view of life was so very specific when she was in college. She wanted the status, she wanted the acceptance, and she kind of wanted things that other people had for herself because she had never had those things. And so her motivation throughout the entire story feels very skewed in a way that makes you question whether or not she was involved in this whole thing to begin with. Every single character in this is either a terrible person or is either morally gray, and I was here for all of it, and it just had all the elements that I typically like in a thriller, so it did it for me. You're probably tired of hearing me talk about this book, and I'm not gonna stop anytime soon because I still have to read the sequel, but that is We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal. And I think, again, it's one of those things, much like Little Thieves, where both of these books are YA, but they are on that cusp of they are YA, but the pacing is more adult, the character construction is more adult, it deals with more adult themes while still being on like that, again, YA spectrum. And I have discovered that I actually quite like that because most of the books I read last year that were YA fantasy were on that cusp. And so anyway, point is, We Hunt the Flame was absolutely phenomenal. We have our main two characters, Safida and Nasir. Safida is the hunter and she strives to provide for her community in order for everybody to survive and be comfortable. She cannot be known as the huntress just because of societal standards and a lot of patriarchal beliefs and structures, and so she goes by the hunter. On the other hand, we've got Nasir, who is the Sultan's son. Atawiya is currently being overrun by the Ars, which is shadow and darkness that is eating up everything. It is the only magical entity left after magic was eradicated from this world, and Safida as the hunter will have to hunt down an ancient artifact that will be able to stop the Ars, while Nasir will have to fetch the artifact and off the hunter, and their paths will overlap and things will go down, and it is so good. It has a slow burn romance. It is a very, 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 very under the subplot. I love the pace of it because, again, it feels more adult fantasy in the way that everything else is the priority of the story. I love commentary in books, and so if you give me a fantasy book that is just riddled once more with commentary about the patriarchal structure, about life in the Middle East, about what that looks like for women, about what that looks like for men on the other end, with the standard of toxic masculinity and everything that comes with it, I will eat it up. And so this is one of those things that I ate up, not only because of, again, the amazing plot and everything, the commentary as well is one of those things that really sold me on this, and it was just entertaining and easy to read. Had the Game of Thrones soundtrack all the way through, and I just gobble. A book that I don't yet own physically, but I will at some point, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I absolutely adored this one. Again, don't tend to read memoirs a lot, but when I do, I find myself finding some really special and great ones. Now, Jeanette McCurdy is obviously famously known for being in iCarly as Sam, and in this memoir, she not only tells her story with everything regarding Nickelodeon, with everything regarding iCarly and the producer, but she will also more notoriously tell her story with her mom. All of the nuances of the generational trauma, all of the nuances about the abuse, with the infantilization that was done to her many a time, her history with eating disorders, her history with her relationship with her mom in general, with all that encompasses. And I thought not only was this a heartbreaking read, but it was so compelling because the way that it was written, you could tell she put a lot of thought, attention, and love into the writing style. We get to see her from very early on at the start of the book all the way to where she is now, and in every single section, every single chapter we read, the writing style perfectly accompanies the age she is in at the time of the story, which I think is so absolutely perfect. We get to see really the mindset she had at the time of all of these things happening, and how most of the time when you are in these situations, you really can't see things for what they are. Even when people tell you that that's what they are, a lot of denial comes up because you don't want to believe that in this case in particular, a mother could really do that to their own child. And so it was a very compelling read, a very hard read as well. I have a whole reading vlog on it. If you want to check it out, I will leave it linked down below so you can see like everything. It does have spoilers, but I think it's one of those books that even if you get quote unquote spoiled for what happens, the book still doesn't lose its appeal or its charm or whatever we want to phrase it as. And it's more than anything, I would think, sort of like this preparation, like this prep, so that you can get into the book with like a clearer mindset on what you're going to get, because there are a lot of themes that are quite triggering. And so there's that. We'll leave it all for the reading vlog because I think Mel then will say it way better than Mel now. And last but not least, one of my last reads of 2022, which was The Push. I actually grew to quite love this one. Character study at its finest. We follow the story of a mother with her newborn child and the exploration of what happens when you think something, as a mother, not all right with your child, and people not believing you, particularly your husband not believing you when you tell said story, or stories, plural in this case. It definitely, if you like The Orphan, it definitely gives you those vibes of unreliable child who is doing all these crazy things, or not all that wild, but that still feel very unsettling and calculative, and then the mother trying to tell the truth of what's happening and absolutely nobody listening to her. The book is written mostly in second person as almost, not necessarily a letter, but almost like dialogue spoken to the husband, in terms of, you didn't believe me when I said this, and that, and this happened, and you reacted this way. And it feels very introspective, but also very resentful towards the husband. And I think what this book does best more than anything is having that uncomfortable conversation that a lot of people don't like to have about motherhood and everything that comes afterward. How that can strain a marriage in a lot of ways, how that can strain people economically, how that can lead to postpartum depression, how a lot of the time a lot of mothers will have their kids and there won't be a connection with the child. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to develop that. It talks about all of those things that are sort of taboo about motherhood that I think are being spoken about more now than they used to be, but still I think explores them in a way that feels very emotive because we get to see the main character's emotions so closely. And I think it allows us to understand exactly what state of mind she is in, not only on her own, but also as a reflection and as a consequence of things happening around her or caused by things around her. The exploration of generational trauma in this one, we get to see the present timeline, and then we also get to see the main character's mom as well as her grandmother. And we get to see how a lot of patterns are passed down generationally in a way that sometimes you don't see and you don't expect. And I think also the exploration of, will I be like my mom? Am I my mom? Am I my grandmother? Am I all of those women that came before me? Am I any different? Am I making a difference? It's just all so very nuanced, so very complex, and so very good. And those are all of my favorites for 2022. Those are my best books I read last year, if I do say so myself. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a massive thumbs up down below, and let a girl know down in the comments exactly what you read in 2022 that you also loved and adored and would consider a new favorite. I am dying to know. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. I am constantly uploading videos and I'm sure you do not want to miss. And if you want more exclusive content, posts, live shows, all the things, I would highly suggest clicking on the Patreon link in the description so that you can check out all of the benefits we have to offer. We rebranded for the new year, so we have a ton of new things, a ton of new benefits, and just things that we have rearranged in order for me to give you guys like the best extra content possible. So if you would like to join us, the link for that is down below alongside all of my social medias. I love you guys so much. Happy New Year to everybody, and I shall see you on the next one. Bye!